George didn't quite understand what was happening. This was nothing like the lively games he played with his friends at school. At just 10 years old, George, a bright-eyed boy with dark skin and a gap-toothed smile, was a cheerful primary school student. He loved playing football and getting lost in colorful storybooks. But most days when he returned from school, the house felt like a ghost town. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Atta, owned a booming electronics store in the bustling Alaba International Market. They worked tirelessly to give George the best life. The school bus would rumble to a stop at 3 p.m., dropping him off at the big cream-colored bungalow they called home in Surulere. Then silence, until his mother's key clicked in the door by 6 p.m. One evening, sitting alone with his knees hugged to his chest, George gathered courage and spoke up. "Mummy, Daddy, I don't like staying home all by myself." His voice trembled a little. Mr. Atta, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, sighed heavily. His wife, a plump woman with kind eyes and a head full of natural curls, knelt before George and cupped his face. "We're sorry, George," she said softly. "It's just for a few hours. We're working hard so you can have a bright future." George nodded, though his chest felt heavy. He understood their struggle, but deep down he wished he had more of their time. A few days later, Mrs. Atta came up with an idea. "George, dear," she said over dinner, "we've spoken to Auntie Betty next door. You'll be staying with her till we get home." Auntie Betty was their neighbor, a slim, pretty woman in her late 20s with a sweet musical voice. She always wore colorful Ankara skirts, and her laughter often floated through the compound. She lived alone, but was friendly to everyone. "Okay, Mummy," George agreed. He knew Auntie Betty well. She often gave him chin-chin or puff-puff when they met by the gate. From then on, George started spending his afternoons in Auntie Betty's apartment. Her home was cozy and always smelled of freshly baked bread. Each day, she welcomed him with a wide smile and a plate of jollof rice or sweet beans. "How was school today, my champ?" she would ask, tousling his soft hair. At first, George felt shy, but Auntie Betty had a way of making him laugh with funny village tales and jokes about stubborn goats and wise old tortoises. Before long, George started looking forward to the afternoons. One Friday evening, just as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the sky blushed orange, Auntie Betty surprised him with a brand new football. "This is for you, George," she said, her eyes twinkling. "You're like the younger brother I never had." George's face lit up like a lantern. "Thank you, Auntie," he said, hugging the ball tightly to his chest. But slowly, things began to shift. One strange afternoon, after George finished his homework, Auntie Betty sat unusually close to him on the couch. There was something different about her smile. It was tighter, almost forced. "George," she said in a soft voice, "let's play a special game. It's our little secret, okay?" George's brows furrowed. He hesitated. "But what kind of game?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "You'll see. It's only for special people like us." "Don't tell anyone, promise?" she insisted, tapping the side of her nose playfully. He swallowed hard. Something inside him twisted. Still, he nodded uncertainly, not wanting to upset her. As the game began, George's stomach churned. This wasn't like the football matches at school. This wasn't like pretending to be pirates or astronauts. I don't want to play anymore," he mumbled, shrinking into the couch. "Shh," Auntie Betty whispered, brushing his shoulder lightly. "You'll get used to it." But George didn't feel reassured. He felt small, confused, and trapped. From that evening, everything changed for George. He started wetting his bed again, a something he hadn't done since he was 6. At first, he thought it was just one embarrassing accident, but it kept happening. Again and again, fear clung to him like a shadow. At school, his once bright laughter faded. He walked with his head down, avoiding his friends' teasing and his teacher's concerned glances. One afternoon, as the class filed out for break, Mrs. Adeyemi, his homeroom teacher, a graceful woman with spectacles perched on her nose, and a voice like warm tea, called him aside. "George, my dear, come, sit," she said gently, patting the chair next to her. George shuffled over, clutching his backpack tightly. "Is everything all right at home?" she asked, peering into his tired, frightened eyes. George opened his mouth and closed it again. Words tangled in his throat. Mrs. Adeyemi waited patiently. Minutes passed. Finally, tears welled up in George's eyes, spilling onto his cheeks. "It's Auntie Betty," he whispered brokenly. She makes me feel bad." Mrs. Adeyemi's heart squeezed. She leaned closer, keeping her voice steady. "You're very brave for telling me, George. This is not your fault, I promise. You are safe now." Without wasting time, Mrs. Adeyemi reported to the school counselor and principal, who immediately contacted Mr. and Mrs. Atta. When the Attas arrived at school, panic written across their faces, and listened to George's halting story, guilt hit them like a sledgehammer. "We are so sorry, George," Mrs. Atta sobbed, gathering him into her arms. Mr. Atta's fists clenched and unclenched. His face, usually calm, was stormy. "We failed you, my son," he whispered fiercely, "but never again." That same day, they reported Auntie Betty to the police. A kind, motherly officer interviewed George, assuring him he had done the right thing. Soon after, Auntie Betty was arrested. The whole street buzzed with disbelief, the cheerful woman with the musical laugh, hiding a dark secret. Determined to protect their son, the Attas rearranged their lives. Mrs. Atta cut down her work hours. Mr. Atta hired an after-school tutor to stay with George. They also took him to a kind counselor who listened to him without judgment and helped him find his light again. Slowly, George's nightmares faded. The bedwetting stopped. He began smiling again, playing football with his friends, drawing cartoons, laughing so hard that he snorted. But deep down, a tiny question still stirred in George's heart. Was everything truly over? Because sometimes, late at night, when the wind whispered against his window, he still thought he heard Auntie Betty's voice calling his name.